The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense forest that surrounded Jujutsu High. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint hum of cursed energy, a constant reminder of the unseen threats that lurked in the shadows. Yuji Itadori stood at the edge of the training grounds, his breath coming in steady puffs as he wiped the sweat from his brow. The day had been grueling, filled with endless drills and sparring sessions, but Yuji thrived on the challenge. His muscles ached, but his spirit was unyielding. He had come a long way since his first days at the school, and the progress was evident in every strike, every dodge, every burst of cursed energy. Beside him, Megumi Fushiguro adjusted the straps on his gloves, his expression as stoic as ever. Megumi was the embodiment of calm precision, his movements calculated and deliberate. His curse technique, the 10 Shadows, was a force to be reckoned with, and he wielded it with a mastery that belied his age. The two had formed a strong bond since Yuji's arrival at Jujutsu High, their contrasting personalities complementing each other in ways that made them a formidable team. Yuji's raw power and unrelenting determination paired with Megumi's strategic mind and versatility created a synergy that was hard to match. Nobara Kujisaki leaned against a nearby tree, her hammer resting on her shoulder and a smirk playing on her lips. She was the wild card of the group, her fiery personality and unorthodox fighting style keeping both her allies and enemies on their toes. Her curse technique, resonance, allowed her to manipulate nails and inflict damage from a distance, a skill she had honed to perfection. Nobara thrived in chaos, and her presence added a layer of unpredictability to their dynamic. The trio had been through countless battles together, each one forging their bond stronger than the last. But today felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a subtle shift that none of them could quite put their finger on. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the training grounds were bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Yuji stretched his arms above his head, a grin spreading across his face. "Another day, another victory," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. Megumi rolled his eyes, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Nobara pushed off the tree and walked over, her smirk widening. "Don't get too cocky, Itadori. You still have a long way to go before you can keep up with me." Before Yuji could retort, a sudden surge of cursed energy erupted from the forest, sending a shockwave through the air. The trio immediately snapped to attention, their senses on high alert. The energy was unlike anything they had felt before. It was ancient, primal, and filled with a malevolence that sent chills down their spines. Yuji's grin faded, replaced by a look of intense focus. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, his eyes scanning the tree line. Megumi's hands moved in a blur as he summoned his divine dogs, the shadowy creatures materializing at his side with a low growl. "Stay sharp," he warned, his voice calm but laced with urgency. Nobara tightened her grip on her hammer, her nails already poised for action. "Looks like we're not done for the day," she said, her smirk replaced by a determined frown. The forest seemed to come alive as the cursed energy intensified, the trees swaying unnaturally as if caught in a violent storm. From the shadows emerged a figure, its form shifting and twisting like smoke. It was a curse, but unlike any they had encountered before. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and shadow, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. The curse let out a guttural roar, the sound reverberating through the air like a thunderclap. Yuji didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his fists crackling with cursed energy. The curse swung a massive clawed hand at him, but Yuji ducked under the attack with practiced ease, his movements fluid and precise. He countered with a devastating uppercut, the force of the blow sending the curse stumbling backward. But before Yuji could press his advantage, the curse's body twisted and contorted, its form shifting to absorb the impact. Megumi was already in motion, his divine dogs darting forward to flank the curse. He summoned Nu, the massive bird-like Shikigami, its wings beating the air as it unleashed a barrage of lightning strikes. The curse howled in pain as the electricity coursed through its body, but it quickly recovered, its form shifting once again to mitigate the damage. Nobara seized the opportunity, hurling a nail at the curse with pinpoint accuracy. The nail embedded itself in the curse's flesh, and with a flick of her wrist, Nobara activated her resonance technique. The curse's body convulsed as the energy from the nail reverberated through its form, causing it to stagger. Despite their combined efforts, the curse showed no signs of weakening. If anything, it seemed to grow stronger with each attack, its form becoming more twisted and grotesque. Yuji gritted his teeth, his mind racing. "This thing's not going down easy," he muttered, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Megumi's expression was grim. "We need to find its weak point," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Nobara nodded, her eyes locked on the curse. Easier said than done, she replied, her tone laced with frustration. As the battle raged on, the curse's attacks became more ferocious, its movements more erratic. It was as if it was feeding off their cursed energy, growing stronger with each passing moment. Yuji's muscles burned with exertion, but he refused to back down. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, the knowledge that the lives of his friends, and countless others, depended on his ability to protect them. He clenched his fists, his cursed energy flaring to life as he prepared to unleash his full power. But before he could make his move, the world around him seemed to shift. The forest blurred, the colors melting together in a dizzying swirl. Yuji's vision darkened, and for a moment, he felt as if he was falling. When his senses returned, he found himself standing back at the edge of the training grounds, the sun still hanging low in the sky. The cursed energy was gone, the forest silent once more. Yuji blinked, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. He looked around, his heart pounding in his chest. Megumi and Nobara were standing beside him, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. What the hell just happened? Nobara asked, her voice tinged with unease. Megumi's brow furrowed as he scanned their surroundings. It's like, we're back at the beginning, he said, his tone cautious. Yuji's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. The curse, the battle, the sudden shift, it all felt like a distant memory, yet the details were crystal clear. He clenched his fists, his cursed energy flaring once more. Something's not right, he said, his voice low and determined. We need to figure out what's going on, and fast. As the trio prepared to investigate, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The initial threat had been neutralized, or so they thought, but the larger implications were impossible to ignore. The curse they had faced was unlike anything they had encountered before, and its sudden disappearance left more questions than answers. Yuji couldn't shake the feeling that they were being manipulated, that there was a larger force at play. The time loop, if that's what it was just the beginning. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into darkness. The battle was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara stood together, their resolve unshaken. Whatever was coming, they would face it head on. But as the shadows deepened, a chilling realization settled over them: they were not alone. Something, or someone, was watching, waiting, and the true battle had yet to begin. The air was thick with tension as Yuji Itadori stood in the heart of Shibuya, the city's neon lights flickering ominously above him. The time loop had reset again, but this time, something felt different. The cursed energy in the air was heavier, more oppressive, as if the very fabric of reality was straining under the weight of an unseen force. Yuji clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had already relived this moment countless times, each loop bringing him closer to understanding the curse that bound him. But now, a new threat loomed on the horizon, one that threatened to unravel everything he had fought for. As Yuji scanned the area, he noticed a figure approaching from the shadows. It was Megumi Fushiguro, his expression grim. Yuji, Megumi said, his voice low and urgent. Something's wrong. The cursed spirits. They're not acting like they should. It's like they're being controlled by something, or someone. Yuji's heart sank. If the cursed spirits were being manipulated, it could only mean one thing: there was a sorcerer behind this, someone powerful enough to bend the rules of the time loop itself. Before Yuji could respond, a deafening roar echoed through the streets. A massive cursed spirit, unlike any they had faced before, emerged from the darkness. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and bone, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. Yuji and Megumi exchanged a glance, their unspoken understanding clear. They had to take it down, and fast. Yuji charged forward, his cursed energy flaring as he delivered a powerful punch to the creature's side. The impact sent shockwaves through the air, but the cursed spirit barely flinched. It retaliated with a swipe of its massive claw, forcing Yuji to leap back. Megumi, meanwhile, summoned his divine dogs, the spectral wolves lunging at the creature with feral intensity. But even their combined efforts seemed futile against the spirit's overwhelming strength. As the battle raged on, Yuji's mind raced. He had to find a way to turn the tide, to break the cycle of defeat that had plagued him in previous loops. He glanced around, his eyes landing on a nearby construction site. An idea sparked in his mind. Megumi, he shouted. Drive it toward the crane. Megumi nodded, understanding Yuji's plan. He directed his divine dogs to harry the cursed spirit, forcing it to move in the desired direction. Yuji sprinted ahead, his muscles burning with exertion as he climbed the crane's scaffolding. He reached the top just as the cursed spirit was herded into position. With a roar of determination, Yuji channeled all his cursed energy into his fist and leapt from the crane, delivering a devastating blow to the creature's head. The impact was colossal, the force of it shaking the ground beneath them. The cursed spirit let out a final, ear-splitting scream before disintegrating into a cloud of cursed energy. But there was no time to celebrate. As the dust settled, Yuji and Megumi were met with an even more unsettling sight, a group of sorcerers, their faces obscured by masks, emerging from the shadows. They moved with eerie synchronization, their cursed energy intertwining in a way that made Yuji's skin crawl. "Who are they?" Yuji muttered, his voice tinged with unease. Megumi's expression darkened. "I don't know, but they're not here to help us." The masked sorcerers attacked without warning, their movements fluid and precise. Yuji and Megumi were forced on the defensive, their earlier exhaustion making it difficult to keep up. Yuji dodged a flurry of cursed energy blasts, his mind racing for a strategy. He noticed that the sorcerers seemed to be working in perfect harmony, their attacks complementing each other in a way that left no openings. "We need to break their rhythm," Yuji shouted to Megumi, who nodded in agreement. Megumi summoned his the massive bird-like Shikigami swooping down to create chaos among the sorcerers. Yuji took advantage of the distraction, launching himself at the nearest opponent. His fists moved like a blur, each strike aimed at disrupting the sorcerer's cursed energy flow. But just as he thought he was gaining the upper hand, one of the sorcerers unleashed a technique that sent Yuji flying backward, his body slamming into a nearby wall. As Yuji struggled to his feet, he felt a surge of fear. These sorcerers were unlike any enemy he had faced before. Their power, their coordination, it was as if they were anticipating his every move. He glanced at Megumi, who was equally battered but still standing. "We can't keep this up," Yuji said, his voice strained. "We need to find a way out of here." But before they could formulate a plan, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. Well, looks like you two could use some help." Yuji's heart leapt as he turned to see Nobara Kujisaki striding toward them, her hammer resting on her shoulder. Her presence was a welcome sight, but Yuji couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Nobara's usual confidence seemed tinged with something darker, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that made Yuji uneasy. Nobara joined the fray without hesitation, her cursed technique wreaking havoc on the masked sorcerers. But as the battle progressed, Yuji noticed something strange. Nobara's attacks were becoming increasingly reckless, her movements almost frantic. It was as if she was driven by something beyond the fight itself. "Nobara, what's going on?" Yuji called out, his voice filled with concern. But she didn't respond, her focus entirely on the enemy. The tide of the battle began to turn, the masked sorcerers finally starting to falter under the combined assault. But just as victory seemed within reach, Nobara suddenly turned on Yuji and Megumi, her cursed energy flaring dangerously. "Nobara, what are you doing?" Yuji shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. Nobara's expression was unreadable, her eyes cold and distant. "I'm sorry, Yuji," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this is the only way." Before Yuji could react, Nobara unleashed a powerful blast of cursed energy, forcing him and Megumi to dive for cover. The betrayal hit Yuji like a physical blow, his mind struggling to process what was happening. "Why, Nobara?" he cried out, his voice raw with emotion. But she didn't answer, her attention already focused on the masked sorcerers, who were now retreating into the shadows. As the dust settled, Yuji and Megumi were left alone, their bodies battered and their spirits shaken. The time loop had taken a darker turn, the stakes higher than ever before. Yuji clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He didn't know what had driven Nobara to betray them, but he was determined to find out. The battle was far from over, and Yuji knew that the next loop would bring even greater challenges. But he was ready. He had to be. For his friends, for himself, and for the world that depended on him. The air was thick with tension as Yuji Itadori and his allies stood in the ruins of Shibuya, the aftermath of their last battle still smoldering around them. The time loop had reset once again, but this iteration felt different, charged with an unfamiliar energy that made the hairs on Yuji's neck stand on end. Before anyone could speak, a figure emerged from the shadows, their presence commanding immediate attention. The newcomer was tall, clad in a sleek black coat with silver accents that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Their face was obscured by a mask resembling a fox, its sharp features etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and dance as they moved. Well, the figure said, their voice a smooth blend of amusement and menace, "if it isn't the time-looped hero and his merry band of misfits. I've been waiting for this moment." Yuji clenched his fists, his instinct screaming that this person was dangerous. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the unease coiling in his gut. The figure tilted their head, the mask's eyes glinting with an eerie light. Call me Kaido. I'm here to make sure your little loop doesn't end the way you want it to. Megumi stepped forward, his shadows already writhing at his feet. What's your stake in this? Why interfere now? Kaido chuckled, a low, resonant sound that sent a shiver down Yuji's spine. Let's just say I have a vested interest in how this timeline plays out. And you, Yuji Itadori, are the key to everything. Before anyone could react, Kaido moved, their speed blinding. In an instant, they were in front of Yuji, a blade of cursed energy materializing in their hand. Yuji barely managed to block the strike, the force of the impact sending him skidding backward. Nobara and Megumi sprang into action, their attacks converging on Kaido in a coordinated assault. Nobara's hammer swung in a wide arc, nails infused with cursed energy flying toward their target, while Megumi's divine dog lunged from the shadows, fangs bared. Kaido dodged the nails with a fluid twist of their body, the movement almost too fast to follow. They countered with a flick of their wrist, sending a wave of cursed energy that forced Nobara to leap back. The divine dog was met with a swift kick, the impact sending it crashing into a nearby wall. Is that all you've got? Kaido taunted, their voice dripping with mockery. Yuji surged forward, his fists glowing with cursed energy. He aimed a series of rapid punches, each one met with a precise block or dodge from Kaido. The two exchanged blows in a flurry of motion, their movements a blur to the onlookers. Yuji's frustration grew with every strike that failed to land. Kaido was toying with them, and it was infuriating. You're strong, Yuji, Kaido said, their tone almost conversational as they parried another punch, but strength alone won't break this loop. You need to understand what's really at stake. Enough talk, Yuji shouted, channeling more cursed energy into his next attack. His fist connected with Kaido's blade, the resulting shockwave cracking the ground beneath them. Kaido staggered back, their mask slipping slightly to reveal a smirk. Not bad, they admitted, but let's see how you handle this. Kaido raised their hand, and the air around them seemed to distort. A swirling vortex of cursed energy formed, coalescing into a massive, serpentine creature that lunged at Yuji with terrifying speed. Yuji barely had time to react, diving to the side as the creature's jaws snapped shut where he had been standing. Megumi summoned his new, the bird-like Shikigami diving at the serpent with a piercing cry. The two cursed spirits clashed in mid-air, their roars shaking the ground. Nobara took advantage of the distraction, hurling a barrage of nails at Kaido. This time, one found its mark, embedding itself in Kaido's shoulder. They hissed in pain but didn't falter, yanking the nail out and crushing it in their hand. Cute trick, they said, their voice cold, but you'll need more than that to stop me. The battle raged on, each exchange more intense than the last. Kaido's presence was a wild card, their motives unclear but their power undeniable. They seemed to anticipate every move, countering with precision and efficiency that left Yuji and his allies struggling to keep up. The cohesion of the group began to fray under the pressure, their frustration mounting as Kaido continued to evade and counter their attacks. We need a plan, Nobara shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. We can't keep going like this. Working on it, Megumi snapped back, his shadows surging forward in an attempt to trap Kaido. But the masked figure slipped through the tendrils with ease, their movements almost preternatural. Yuji gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Kaido's words echoed in his head, what was really at stake? What did they know about the time loop that he didn't? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the fight. They couldn't afford to lose focus now. As the battle reached its peak, Kaido suddenly stepped back, raising their hands in a gesture of mock surrender. Enough, they said, their voice calm despite the chaos around them. I've seen what I needed to see. You're strong, but you're not ready. Not yet. What are you talking about? Yuji demanded, his chest heaving from exertion. Kaido's mask shifted, revealing a pair of piercing golden eyes. The loop isn't just a curse, it's a test. And if you want to break it, you'll need to face the truth about yourself. Until then, we'll meet again. With that, Kaido vanished, leaving behind only a faint trace of cursed energy. The serpentine creature dissolved into the air, and the battlefield fell silent. Yuji and his allies stood amidst the wreckage, their exhaustion palpable. What the hell was that? Nobara muttered, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. I don't know, Yuji admitted, his mind still reeling from the encounter. But one thing's clear, this just got a lot more complicated. As they regrouped, the weight of Kaido's words hung heavy in the air. The time loop was no longer just a battle against external forces, it was a battle against themselves. And with Kaido now in the mix, the stakes had never been higher. The air was thick with tension as Yuji Itadori stood in the center of the battlefield, his fists clenched and his breathing ragged. The time loop had become his prison, each iteration bringing him closer to understanding the mysterious curse that bound him, yet no closer to breaking free. This time, however, something felt different. The cursed energy swirling around him was darker, more oppressive, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Across from him stood Sukuna, the king of curses, his grin as sharp as the talons he flexed. But this wasn't the Sukuna Yuji had come to know, this was a version of him that seemed to have tapped into something far more sinister. "You're running out of time, brat," Sukuna sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "How many more loops will it take before you realize you're just a pawn in a game you can't win?" Yuji's heart pounded as he tried to process Sukuna's words. A pawn? What did that mean? Before he could respond, Sukuna lunged forward, his movements a blur of cursed energy. Yuji barely managed to dodge, the ground where he had stood moments earlier exploding in a shower of debris. He countered with a punch infused with cursed energy, but Sukuna caught his fist effortlessly, his grip like iron. Pathetic, Sukuna spat, twisting Yuji's arm and sending him crashing into a nearby wall. Pain shot through Yuji's body, but he forced himself to stand, his mind racing. This wasn't just another fight, this was a turning point. He could feel it. As Yuji struggled to his feet, a voice echoed in his mind, a voice he hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. "Yuji," it said, soft but urgent. "You need to listen to me." It was Megumi. Yuji's eyes widened as he realized Megumi's consciousness was somehow reaching him through the chaos of the time loop. "Sukuna's not just trying to kill you," Megumi continued. "He's using the loops to weaken the barrier between our world and the cursed realm. If he succeeds, he'll unleash something far worse than himself." Yuji's blood ran cold. The loops weren't just a curse, they were a trap, a way for Sukuna to amass enough power to break free and plunge the world into darkness. Before Yuji could respond, Sukuna was on him again, his attacks more ferocious than ever. Yuji dodged and weaved, his movements fueled by desperation. He needed a plan, but every second he spent fighting was another second Sukuna grew stronger. "Megumi," Yuji thought, his mental voice strained. "What do I do?" There was a pause, and then Megumi's voice came through, steady but grim. "You have to break the loop from the inside. But it's going to cost you. You'll have to sacrifice something, something important." Yuji's mind raced. What could he sacrifice? His life? His connection to Sukuna? The answer hit him like a thunderbolt: his memories. If he could sever the link between himself and the loops, he might be able to stop Sukuna's plan. But it would mean forgetting everything, his friends, his battles, even his own identity. The weight of the decision pressed down on Yuji as he fought to stay alive. Sukuna's laughter echoed in his ears, a cruel reminder of how little time he had. "You're running out of options, brat," Sukuna taunted, his attacks growing more relentless. Yuji gritted his teeth, his resolve hardening. He didn't have a choice. If sacrificing his memories was the only way to stop Sukuna, then so be it. With a surge of cursed energy, Yuji unleashed a devastating punch, forcing Sukuna back momentarily. "Megumi," Yuji thought, his voice firm. "Tell me how to do it." Megumi's instructions were swift and precise. Yuji needed to channel all of his cursed energy into a single point, creating a rift in the fabric of the loop. But the process would be excruciating, and there was no guarantee it would work. Yuji nodded, his determination unwavering. He took a deep breath, focusing all of his energy into his core. The air around him crackled with power as he began to chant the incantation Megumi had taught him. Sukuna's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in Yuji's energy. "What are you doing, brat?" he growled, lunging forward to stop him. But Yuji was ready. With a roar, he unleashed the energy he had gathered, creating a blinding explosion of light that engulfed the battlefield. When the light faded, Yuji was on his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. The loop was breaking, he could feel it. But so was his connection to everything he had ever known. Images of his friends, his battles, and his life flashed before his eyes, only to fade into nothingness. Sukuna staggered back, his form flickering as the loop destabilized. "You fool," he snarled, his voice filled with rage. "You think this will stop me? I am eternal." But even as he spoke, his form began to dissolve, the cursed energy that bound him to the loop unraveling. Yuji collapsed to the ground, his vision blurring. He could feel the memories slipping away, each one a piece of himself he would never get back. But as the darkness closed in, he felt a sense of peace. He had done what he had to do. The world would be safe, even if he couldn't remember why. The last thing he saw before everything went black was Megumi's face, his expression a mix of sorrow and pride. And then, there was nothing. When Yuji opened his eyes, he was lying in an unfamiliar room, the walls bare and the air still. He sat up slowly, his mind a blank slate. He didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. But as he looked down at his hands, he felt a strange sense of purpose, as if something deep within him was urging him forward. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: his fight wasn't over. And this time, he would be ready. The air was thick with tension as Yuji Itadori stood in the heart of Shibuya, the city's neon lights flickering ominously in the distance. The time loop had become a prison, each reset bringing him closer to despair but also granting him a grim advantage: knowledge. He had lived through this moment countless times, but this iteration felt different. The cursed energy in the air was heavier, more oppressive, as if the very fabric of reality was straining under the weight of the loop. Sukuna's laughter echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. "You're running out of time, brat," the king of curses sneered. Yuji clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He couldn't afford to fail again. The stakes had escalated beyond anything he could have imagined. The enemy, a mysterious curse user orchestrating the loop, had revealed their hand. They were using the time loop to amass an army of cursed spirits, each iteration strengthening their forces. The city was on the brink of annihilation, and Yuji knew that if he didn't break the cycle soon, Shibuya, and possibly the world, would be lost. The only way out was to confront the enemy head-on, but even with his growing strength, the odds were overwhelming. He needed allies, strategy, and a plan to exploit the enemy's weakness. Yuji's first stop was Megumi Fushiguro. The two had trained together countless times in the loop, their bond growing stronger with each reset. Megumi's analytical mind was crucial in devising a strategy. "We need to find a way to disrupt their control over the loop," Megumi said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If we can destabilize their cursed energy at the right moment, we might be able to break free." Yuji nodded, his mind racing. He had noticed a pattern in the enemy's attacks, a slight delay in their reactions whenever they were forced to multitask. It was a small weakness, but it was something they could exploit. Training became their lifeline. Yuji pushed his body to its limits, honing his cursed energy control and experimenting with new techniques. He discovered that by channeling his energy in short, concentrated bursts, he could create shockwaves that disrupted the enemy's movements. Megumi, meanwhile, refined his domain expansion, weaving intricate patterns of cursed energy that could trap even the most powerful spirits. Together, they sparred relentlessly, their movements growing more fluid and precise with each session. The time loop had become a crucible, forging them into warriors capable of facing the impossible. But they couldn't do it alone. Yuji sought out Nobara Kujisaki, whose raw power and unyielding determination made her a formidable ally. Nobara had been trapped in the loop as well, her memories fragmented but her instincts sharp. "I'm tired of this deja vu crap," she growled, hammering a nail into a cursed doll. "Let's end this." The trio trained together, their combined strengths creating a synergy that gave them a fighting chance. Nobara's resonance technique proved particularly effective, allowing her to target multiple enemies simultaneously by linking their cursed energy. It was a risky move, but one that could turn the tide in their favor. As the final confrontation loomed, Yuji and his allies uncovered a critical piece of information. The enemy's control over the loop was tied to a specific location in Shibuya, a cursed object hidden deep within the city's underground. Destroying it would sever their connection to the loop, but reaching it would be no easy task. The enemy had fortified the area with an army of cursed spirits, each one more powerful than the last. The clock was ticking, and every second counted. The battle began with a deafening roar as Yuji and his allies charged into the fray. Cursed energy crackled in the air, lighting up the night with bursts of blue and black. Yuji moved like a whirlwind, his fists slamming into cursed spirits with devastating force. He used his newfound shockwave technique to create openings, his attacks precise and calculated. Megumi summoned his divine dogs, their ethereal forms tearing through the enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. Nobara's nails flew through the air, each one striking its mark with deadly accuracy. The trio fought as one, their movements synchronized and their resolve unshakable. But the enemy was relentless. A towering cursed spirit emerged from the shadows, its massive form dwarfing everything in its path. Its attacks were devastating, each swing of its arm sending shockwaves through the ground. Yuji gritted his teeth, his body aching from the strain. He knew they couldn't afford to falter. "Megumi, now," he shouted. Megumi nodded, his hands moving in a blur as he activated his domain expansion. The air shimmered as a labyrinth of cursed energy enveloped the spirit, trapping it in a maze of illusions. Yuji seized the opportunity, channeling all his energy into a single, devastating punch. The shockwave tore through the spirit, shattering its form and sending shards of cursed energy flying in every direction. The victory was short-lived. More spirits emerged, their numbers overwhelming. Yuji and his allies were pushed to their limits, their bodies battered and their energy waning. But they refused to give up. Nobara unleashed her resonance technique, linking the cursed energy of multiple spirits and striking them down in one fell swoop. Megumi's divine dogs tore through the remaining enemies, their ferocity unmatched. Yuji stood at the center of the chaos, his fists blazing with cursed energy. He could feel the loop straining, its hold on reality weakening with each passing moment. Finally, they reached the cursed object, a grotesque artifact pulsating with dark energy. Yuji knew what he had to do. He channeled all his remaining strength into a single, decisive strike. His fist connected with the object, the impact sending a shockwave rippling through the air. The artifact shattered, its cursed energy dissipating into nothingness. The loop began to unravel, the world around them flickering like a broken film reel. Yuji felt a surge of relief as the oppressive weight of the loop lifted, but there was no time to celebrate. The enemy, now desperate, launched one final attack. The battle that followed was a blur of motion and chaos. Yuji and his allies fought with everything they had, their movements fueled by sheer determination. The enemy's attacks grew more erratic, their control slipping as the loop collapsed. Yuji saw an opening and took it, his fist connecting with the enemy's chest in a blinding flash of cursed energy. The enemy staggered, their form flickering as the last remnants of the loop dissipated. With a final, desperate cry, they vanished, their cursed energy scattering into the void. The city fell silent, the neon lights flickering back to life as the loop was finally broken. Yuji collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. He looked up at his allies, their faces etched with relief and triumph. They had done it. Against all odds, they had broken free. But Yuji knew this was only the beginning. The enemy had been defeated, but the scars of the loop would remain. He stood, his resolve stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head on. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of peace, the weight of the loop finally lifted from his shoulders. The air crackled with cursed energy as Yuji Itadori stood at the center of the battlefield, his fists clenched and his breathing ragged. The time loop had worn him down, but it had also sharpened his instincts, forcing him to adapt and grow stronger with each repetition. Across from him, Sukuna, the king of curses, loomed with a sinister grin, his four eyes gleaming with malice. The stakes had never been higher, this was the sixth iteration of the loop, and Yuji knew that if he didn't end it here, the cycle would continue, trapping him and his friends in an endless nightmare of bloodshed and despair. The clash began with a deafening roar as Sukuna lunged forward, his claws slashing through the air like blades. Yuji dodged with a swift sidestep, his movements honed by countless battles. He countered with a devastating punch, his cursed energy flaring as his fist connected with Sukuna's ribs. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the ground, but Sukuna barely flinched, retaliating with a backhand that sent Yuji skidding across the battlefield. Dust and debris erupted around him as he regained his footing, his eyes narrowing in determination. He couldn't afford to hold back, not now. Sukuna's laughter echoed through the air as he unleashed a barrage of cursed energy slashes, each one slicing through the terrain like a hot knife through butter. Yuji weaved through the onslaught with a mix of agility and precision, his body moving on instinct. He closed the distance between them in a blur, his fists a whirlwind of motion as he unleashed a flurry of blows. Each strike was infused with cursed energy, the sheer force of his attacks forcing Sukuna to take a step back. But the king of curses was far from defeated. With a flick of his wrist, Sukuna summoned a massive wave of cursed energy, the sheer force of it sending Yuji flying backward. Yuji hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He rolled to his feet just in time to see Sukuna charging toward him, his claws extended and his grin widening. Desperation fueled Yuji's movements as he summoned every ounce of cursed energy he could muster. His body glowed with an intense aura as he unleashed his domain expansion, unstoppable fist of the divine. The battlefield shifted, the air thickening with power as Yuji's domain took hold. Within its confines, his physical strength and speed were amplified to their absolute limits, giving him the edge he needed to stand toe-to-toe with Sukuna. The two titans clashed in a storm of fists and cursed energy, their movements a blur of raw power and precision. Yuji's punches landed with bone-crushing force, each one driving Sukuna back, but the king of curses retaliated with equal ferocity. His claws tore through Yuji's defenses, leaving deep gashes that bled freely. Yet Yuji refused to falter. He pushed past the pain, his resolve unshakable. With a roar, he unleashed a devastating uppercut, the force of it sending Sukuna soaring into the air. Yuji followed up with a powerful leap, his fist colliding with Sukuna's chest in mid-air, the impact creating a shockwave that shattered the ground below. But Sukuna wasn't done yet. As he landed, he summoned his own domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The battlefield was engulfed in a nightmarish landscape of twisted structures and endless blades, each one poised to strike. Yuji's domain clashed with Sukuna's, the two forces colliding in a chaotic maelstrom of cursed energy. The air itself seemed to scream as the domains fought for dominance, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Yuji gritted his teeth, his body straining under the pressure. He knew he couldn't outlast Sukuna in a battle of domains, he had to end this quickly. With a surge of determination, Yuji unleashed a new technique he had been developing throughout the loops, Primordial Burst. His body became a conduit for pure cursed energy, the power radiating from him in waves. He charged at Sukuna with blinding speed, his fists a blur of motion as he unleashed a barrage of attacks. Each strike was infused with the raw essence of cursed energy, the sheer force of it overwhelming Sukuna's defenses. The King of Curses staggered, his grin faltering for the first time. Yuji pressed his advantage, his movements a perfect blend of strategy and instinct. Sukuna roared in frustration, his cursed energy flaring as he unleashed a devastating counterattack. His claws tore through Yuji's defenses, the sheer force of the blow sending him crashing to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him as he struggled to rise, his body battered and broken. But even as darkness threatened to overtake him, Yuji refused to give up. He thought of his friends, Megumi, Nobara, Gojo, and the countless lives that depended on him. With a final surge of strength, he pushed himself to his feet, his cursed energy flaring brighter than ever. The two warriors faced each other one last time, the air thick with tension. Sukuna's grin returned, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Yuji's determination burned like a fire, his resolve unshakable. With a roar, he charged forward, his fist glowing with cursed energy. Sukuna met him head-on, their fists colliding in a blinding explosion of power. The force of the impact shattered the remnants of their domains, the battlefield reduced to a crater of destruction. For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, Sukuna's body began to disintegrate, his cursed energy dissipating into the air. Yuji stood victorious, his body battered but unbroken. The time loop had been broken, the cycle of despair finally ended. As the dust settled, Yuji allowed himself a moment of relief, his chest heaving with exhaustion. But he knew this was only the beginning. The battle against curses was far from over, and he would need to grow even stronger to protect the people he cared about. With a deep breath, he turned and walked away, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air crackled with cursed energy, thick and oppressive, as Yuji Itadori stood at the center of the battlefield, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. The time loop had pushed him to his absolute limit, forcing him to relive this moment countless times, each iteration more grueling than the last. But this time was different. This time, he could feel it, the threads of fate unraveling, the universe itself holding its breath as the final confrontation reached its crescendo. Across from him stood Sukuna, the King of Curses, his malevolent grin stretching wide as he reveled in the chaos. "You're still standing, brat? I'll give you credit, you're persistent. But persistence won't save you," Sukuna sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Yuji clenched his fists, his knuckles white, and met Sukuna's gaze with a fire that refused to be extinguished. "I'm not doing this just for me," Yuji growled, his voice steady despite the pain coursing through his body. "I'm doing this for everyone you've hurt. For everyone who believes in me. This ends here, Sukuna. No more loops. No more games." The battlefield was a wasteland of shattered earth and swirling cursed energy, the remnants of their previous clashes littering the ground. Megumi Fushiguro and Nobara Kujisaki fought valiantly nearby, their movements precise and desperate as they held off Sukuna's relentless onslaught of cursed spirits. Megumi's shadows writhed like living things, striking with deadly accuracy, while Nobara's nails pierced through the air, each hit resonating with a thunderous crack. But even they were reaching their limits, their breaths ragged and their movements slowing. "Yuji," Megumi shouted, his voice strained. "We can't hold them off much longer. You need to end this." Yuji nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew what he had to do. The time loop had taught him one thing above all else: victory wasn't just about strength, it was about understanding. Understanding Sukuna, understanding himself, and understanding the fragile balance between them. With a roar, Yuji surged forward, his body a blur of motion as he closed the distance between himself and Sukuna. The King of Curses laughed, his claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed, but Yuji anticipated the move, ducking low and driving his fist into Sukuna's gut. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, but Sukuna barely flinched. "Is that all you've got?" Sukuna taunted, his voice laced with mockery. Yuji didn't respond, his mind focused on the rhythm of the fight, the ebb and flow of cursed energy that connected them. He could feel Sukuna's power, vast and unrelenting, But he could also feel something else, a flicker of doubt, a crack in the curse's armor. The time loop had given Yuji something Sukuna could never have, the knowledge of every mistake, every misstep, every moment of weakness. And he intended to use it. The battle escalated into a frenzy of blows, each strike shaking the very foundations of the earth. Yuji's fists collided with Sukuna's claws, sparks flying as cursed energy clashed in a dazzling display of power. Blood dripped from Yuji's wounds, his body pushed beyond its limits, but he refused to fall. "You're nothing but a vessel, a pawn in my game," Sukuna spat, his voice rising in fury. "You can't win." Yuji's eyes burned with determination as he countered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm not your pawn. I'm Yuji Itadori, and I'm going to stop you." With a surge of energy, Yuji unleashed a devastating flurry of attacks, each blow landing with pinpoint precision. Sukuna staggered, his grin faltering for the first time. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. But Yuji wasn't done. Drawing on every ounce of strength he had left, he channeled his cursed energy into a single, earth-shattering punch. The force of the impact sent Sukuna flying, his body crashing into the ground with a deafening roar. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent, the dust settling as Yuji stood over Sukuna's fallen form. The king of curses struggled to rise, his body flickering with unstable energy. You can't defeat me," Sukuna rasped, his voice weak but defiant. Yuji knelt beside him, his expression a mix of exhaustion and sorrow. "I don't want to defeat you," he said quietly. "I want to save you. You're a part of me, Sukuna. And if I can't save you, then I've failed." Sukuna's eyes widened, a flicker of something unfamiliar crossing his face. For the briefest of moments, the mask of cruelty slipped, revealing the broken soul beneath. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a sneer. "Sentimental fool," Sukuna spat, his voice fading as his form began to dissolve. "You'll regret this." Yuji watched as Sukuna's cursed energy dissipated into the air, leaving behind an eerie stillness. The battle was over. The aftermath was both triumphant and somber. Yuji collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion, but a sense of peace settled over him. Megumi and Nobara rushed to his side, their faces a mix of relief and concern. "You did it," Megumi said, his voice filled with awe. "You actually did it." Nobara punched Yuji's shoulder lightly, a grin breaking through her tears. "Took you long enough, idiot," Yuji laughed weakly, the sound echoing across the desolate battlefield. "Yeah. I guess I did." But the victory came at a cost. The time loop had left its mark, not just on Yuji but on the world around them. The balance of cursed energy had shifted, the universe itself reshaped by their actions. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Yuji felt hope. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over the battlefield, Yuji stood with his friends, their silhouettes etched against the horizon. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but they would face it together. The time loop had taught Yuji the value of perseverance, of understanding, and of the bonds that connected them. And as they walked away from the battlefield, the weight of their journey heavy but their spirits unbroken, Yuji knew one thing for certain: no matter what the future held, they would face it head on. The battle was over, but their story was just beginning.